Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Locknote for day 2 of Black Hat Asia. We hope you guys have had a wonderful conference so far. I know we've all seen some great research, some great talks, have gotten to use this digital platform for the past 2 days. So I guess we'll go around, introduce ourselves, and kick off this Locknote for the closing of Black Hat. Neil?
All right. Hi. How's it going? I'm Neil Weiler. In our community, I'm better known as Grifter. I've been on the review board for I don't even know how many years now. Spoken at Black Hat a lot, and they just kind of keep me around. So here I am. So happy to be here and with some great people, and hopefully we'll have some interesting things to talk about. Add some questions or topics in the chat. This way we have more to talk about.
Thank you. Or Asuka, you want to introduce yourself?
So I'm Asuka Nakajima, and I work for NTT as a security researcher. And my main research areas are about vulnerability discovery and reverse engineering and IoT security. So especially this few years, I focus on the research of consumer IoT devices, like measuring the risk of one-day vulnerability and studying about supply chain risk of OEM IoT devices. And I'm a review board since Black Hat Asia 2018. So this is my 3rd year as a regional review board. And I'm also involved in lots of community activities. For example, I'm the founder and the leader of the CDF4 Girls, which is the first female community in Japan. So nice to meet you all.
In my turn.
Yeah.
You're up.
It's very nice to meet all of you. And I'm Seungju Kim, and from Korea University of Korea, and I became a Black Hat Asia review board from 2019, and this is a second opportunity to join these meetings. And but thank you to Black Hat management teams, and it was very great to see all the people in different time zones.
Absolutely. And hi, I'm Mika Devonshire. I'm a digital forensics and incident response specialist at Black Panda, which is an exclusive incident response digital forensics company in Hong Kong and Singapore. I've been investigating cyber crimes and very busy this year. So I guess we'll have a lot to talk about.
The double-edged sword, right? It's like, oh, I've got a lot of great stories. A lot of bad stuff happens.
Exactly. So I guess we could start with the topic of bad stuff. If you all want to go around, I know security's been very busy lately. It's great to have Black Hat at this time of year to sort of wrap up and see how we've done through Q3 and what is it going to look like moving forward.
Sure. I think I can comment on that first. I think what was interesting was when everything started happening with the pandemic and going into different quarantines and stuff like that. Everybody was like, oh, well, we're going home and we're going to work from home, and you're going to have all this free time to work on those projects that you needed to get done, unless you worked in cybersecurity, in which case, man, have we been busy, right? There's been some interesting challenges with expanding our, environments outside of our, traditional sphere, or just the scale of the expansion was an interesting challenge as well, where, you were seeing companies sending employees home and being like, well, we need you to work, but we haven't sourced you a laptop yet. We don't have a corporate device as far as a phone for you yet. We are working on multi-factor authentication. We're working on increasing our VPN licenses. There were all of these, what we would consider foundational things that became incredible challenges when the issue of scale, came about. And so I feel like just for the first couple of months, it was just like, go, 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 make sure we're just like shoring up defenses as quickly as we could. And in some cases, seeing a lot of organizations doing things that in a normal environment or situation, we would never, ever do, right? So that's been an interesting challenge. I don't know what all of your experiences have been with that, but it's been interesting.
I can chime in on the unusual occurrences. So it's tough because no security teams had time to really train up their end users or, mass rollout security awareness training, best practices. Each of us could jump on webinars and give some tips like updating your firmware for all your devices. As a SUGA, I'm sure you probably deal with that a lot. People just not updating their firmware. But even things like how to use RDP or how to use the internet. So unfortunately, one of my cases started as an employee who had gone home. The company hadn't yet put two-factor authentication on their VPN services. And the employee actually plugged his laptop in with an Ethernet cord to the modem directly, exposing everything to the internet, including his RDP, which was brute forced. The attacker got in through RDP, saw that he had a VPN session open, pried around, and within 10 hours had pivoted into the network and encrypted about 80 out of 100 systems with ransomware.
Cool.
Mimikatz on the domain credential. I mean, it was ugly.
Okay, so this few months, I saw a lot of phishing attempts that are tied to COVID-19. And also I see attackers started to target the platforms that are heavily used in the remote work, such as Zoom and WebEx and etc. And also, as Mika said, corporate network infrastructures are protected by the company's engineer, but the home routers are not as secure as a corporate infrastructure. So because it is managed by the individual, the employee. So I think this would be really good attack vector for the attackers. Yeah.
Yes, in case of Korea, we think that the most big problem is that we can use physical security like before. I mean that physical security such as preventing USB and the preventing mobile phones camera cannot be realized in the company. So, our security team of Korea now studying about how to we improve the physical security at home. So and also in case of Korea, even young students need to use distance learning systems, but the kids cannot use the security configurations of the notebook and so on. So nowadays we think about the importance of the usable security for the kids and housewives and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you mentioned, just even the physical security aspect of it. But I was hearing stories again from organizations of all different sizes. Like this wasn't just something where small businesses or mom and pop type of shops were trying to struggle with this. This was like large multinational corporations who were like, I guess just pack up your machine and take it to your house, and like we talk about data loss prevention, and then you're like, take your entire machine and just take it with you. So from a physical security standpoint, we were literally just handing employees everything and just saying like, take this to your house and hook it to your internet. And then hopefully like you can just keep on working. Asuga, you mentioned as well, like the increase in phishing campaigns that were specifically around, the virus. And I as part of my personal, like, threat intelligence, time that I spend, I bump around on, the dark net and dark markets and stuff like that. And you could see there were a large uptick in the scam guides that were specific to the virus, saying like, here's how you want to craft an email, like preying on the fear that people had, or doing things like saying, oh, we understand that you're, like employees basically don't know how things are working right now. So using that confusion to get them to click on things or install things they wouldn't do, like, oh, here's the new platform for everybody getting together on a video chat, run this executable, and people were just doing it. And so like some of the other like huge things was like the uptick in business email compromise. Now again, because everybody's like working from home and trying to do this stuff, you had like, how do we work with financial stuff? How do we pay bills, and who's handling what, and how are we doing that without our normal systems? And so those phishing campaigns were leading to, hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars being just, wired off to, the wrong account, and, at the cost of, $10 for some scam guide on the dark market, they're turning around and turning that into a business email compromise campaign that's returning an absurd amount of money.
Do you think that in next year, the papers related with remote work security increased in Black Hat?
Will we see more submissions around it? I think we already have, kind of, right? We just finished up the selections for the Europe show, and there were quite a few that are related to securing remote workers and remote environments. And you're like, man, like researchers were on it like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to develop.
With BEC, definitely a huge uptick, taking advantage of that remote work. And, if the company doesn't have MFA, there's really not much you can do but turn to the admin and say, why didn't you have this up yet? The other challenge is that a lot of the whitelisting policies only work to prevent remote access, in a normal situation. Mm-hmm. So when employees, use a personal VPN, or they go home and they're using an unknown IP address, even just the high rate of IT support tickets is pushing down the importance or the ability for users who actually have, a live scam on their device from being heard. So if they're still being, connected, and I've seen a lot of mail forwarding is typically a tactic. So even if the user changes their password, if your admins don't check all the forwarding rules, or the mailbox delegation, or your DKIM aren't set properly, you can just continue that data loss for, I've seen up to 3 weeks. They didn't catch the forwarding rules. Wow. So again, you have to check every box really, really, truly in this environment.
And what's crazy about that is like these, like, I don't know. I mean, we just sat through 2 days of incredible research where it's, the amount of know how to accomplish some of the attacks that we were just learning about. It's like, oh, you have to take this machine and dip it in liquid nitrogen while you're on a boat somewhere along the equator. Like there's all this crazy stuff. But right now we're talking about like the most fundamental and foundational things, like were what were causing companies like full outages or just even like disruption. I mean, we're on Zoom right now, right? And like the Zoom bashing and jumping in and just disrupting people's meetings and just having a good time, I guess, like clowning around, was really disruptive for people. And so like, again, super foundational things that we kind of, I guess, had to start focusing back on that rather than, again, like these super complex O-Day style things. Like you're not going to burn something like that or put that much effort in when somebody plugs their laptop straight into their home router, right? So
yeah.
Well, I guess I don't know. I guess I'll ask a question. There was no questions in the chat. Hey, people watching this, put questions in there. Give us topics to talk about. I will ask. I guess like what is something outside of the elephant in the room that is COVID-19? Like what are struggles or things that you guys are working with now or trying to get a handle around that you think we'll be working on for the foreseeable future or hopefully finding solutions for sometime in the future? What's your big project or what's that thing that sticks in the back of your head that maybe keeps you up at night?
Okay, so I can talk a bit. So as I said earlier, I'm now mainly researching about the IoT security, especially on consumer IoT devices. And during the research, I sometimes analyze IoT firmware, but it's quite vulnerable. And for example, the binary files that are included in the firmware are not that secure. For instance, the common vulnerability mitigation technology, such as Pi, Stack Canary, and Fortify Source, are frequently not enabled. And also, the version of the third-party libraries is often quite old, really, really old. And also, the patch release cycle for IoT devices are also not as good as the desktop application. In my past research I conducted last year, I found that a lot of new type of one-day exploitation risk for the IoT devices. And so now I'm thinking that this is also covered in yesterday's keynote, but I think one way to solve this kind of problem is to explicitly write the list the software bill of materials and the security patch distribution cycle for the devices as a level, like a nutritional level. So yeah, but it is also talked in yesterday's keynote. So maybe everyone already knows. But yeah, this is my current perspective for the IoT security field.
Well, I think the fact that if it was brought up in the keynote yesterday and you're bringing it up now, maybe we should care. So don't take it as oh, I'm repeating something that was said in the keynote. If it's something that's of concern to you as well, then obviously, it's of importance.
I think that in COVID-19 era, is it possible to do all the works at home? To do that, I think that for doing that, we need more detailed data classification rules and so on. So by doing this, we can use more granularized access control system and so on. But I think that most of company or the most of school doesn't have that kind of detailed rules for the data classifications. So I think that in nowadays, security guys don't think about that. Nowadays, security guys likes more technical one and so on. So, but I think that in COVID-19 era, we should return to the basic, and we should think again the basic rules about security of our home and our company and so on.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, our investigations are only as good as the data that we're getting and the way that we're, carving that data up. I realized when I introduced myself, I was just I'm part of the review board. I'm a principal threat hunter for RSA by day. So I spend all day carving up, super large data sets and trying to find the little anomaly in it that makes you pause and go, what's that? But without clean, well-organized data to move through, it's an impossible job. I guess, well, depending on who you talk to, if you talk to a lot of vendors out on an expo floor somewhere, they'll tell you that their machine learning or AI will do that for you. I assure you, all of their if-then statements they call machine learning are not, really, up to snuff at this point. But But yeah, I agree with that 100%. Like some, again, we talk about this stuff all the time. It's a lot of this is like foundational, basic block and tackle security that we've been, were some of the first things we all learned when we started doing this, right? So keep it simple.
There's nothing more frustrating for an investigation than when the client just doesn't have the data you need to perform the investigation. It's a chicken and egg situation. And unfortunately, if you haven't already set up logging, or you don't keep the hard drives or images after an incident, it's really hard to, hire someone and have them tell you what happened, who did it, am I still infected, without that full picture of the data set. So you asked, what's a project that we're working on keeps us up at night. My team is trying to create a fully remote cyber war room and figure out what is the fastest, most efficient way to get client data, to spin up instances we need for analysis, have sandboxes ready for malware analysis, because either we can't get to the client site, or they'll hand us this data and there's 5 of us working on it spread across multiple continents. It's not the way it used to be. You don't have, well, typically a lot of these scenarios are in the cloud, but you don't have a go bag and you can't go greet someone.
Right. You're used to like showing up on site, ordering a bunch of pizza, and like getting to work, right? Yeah. So, I'm with you on that. I think that I think it's one of the biggest frustrations, I guess, somebody who's like, in incident response, is that you're when you show up and you don't have that data, and then it's like, okay, well, now we have to go around like trying to deploy things or do things after the fact. When I talk to folks normally about like what they should have, like in a SOC, like standing up a SOC and things like that, because of my experience, like running an op for Black Hat, people will often say like, what are the technologies that I should have or do whatever? And again, basic block and tackle. I'm like, log everything, like literally log everything. If you have a device that creates a log, just write it to disk somewhere. You don't even have to put it in a SIM if you don't have that technology, or it's too expensive to keep dumping the stuff in there. I'm like, even if they never look at it, but please, please look at your logs, like have them, because when the IR team comes in, if there's a breach, and you can turn around and be like, well, we have a bunch of logs, we've never looked at them, but we have them, you're in a much better situation than trying to run around collecting things after the fact. It's just, like I said, storage is cheap. Dump it to disk. Come on, give me something to work with.
Well, and with Amazon or Azure, you just click a couple buttons, and then all of a sudden your data is stored for cheap. It's right around the corner.
That's what. Let's put out a little like a tweet or something that's like, this is the button, this is what you check. Please, for your incident responders, check this box. We have a question in the chat. Yes, it is. Have you all seen a difference in the types of incidents or breaches over the past 6 months? Mika, what do you think of that one?
So I'd say similar to what everyone was talking about, the key ingredients are the same. So it's RDP brute force, Mimikatz, credential lateral movement, ransomware, or backdoor, data exfil, wait a little bit, get caught, try to come back in. BEC all looks pretty normal. It's just the way that the recipe is prepared is a bit different. So BEC, a lot of it will focus on that fear you were talking about. Unprecedented things like, not protecting your wireless connection at home, or if you are traveling, not realizing how much data could be exposed while you're traveling. Sungju mentioned physical security, so taking USBs and things and not encrypting data. All of those things have changed the landscape. But in general, these attacks still have the same core components, but the rate at which we're seeing them has just gone through the roof. Hope that answered. Anyone else?
That's good. Anybody else? Right. I mean, I will say, man, ransomware is having a good time, huh? Like, my gosh, some of the ransomware attacks in the last 6 months. I mean, you're talking $500,000, $1 million like payouts, and then like some of the like negotiations are things for. I'm gonna blank on which company it was that was just recently hit up for. I think was it 24 million? I want to say it was 24 million, and they didn't pay. So they were like, oh, well, now you're going to give us 40 million. And it's like $40 million. Like, I've seen some interesting stuff even in like the back and forth negotiations between like when the ransomware attack occurs, and normally you get the the scary pop-up that gives you the skull that's we're gonna do whatever, but the shift from it just being that your files are locked up to what am I trying to say here? Extortionware, like saying like being like, okay, not only did we lock your files up, but we also exfiltrated a bunch of data. So now even if you did the right thing and you did the backups and you did all that type of stuff, if you don't pay us, we're going to just dump it on the internet. And so the shift from straight up like locking up your files to now not only locking them up, but also exfiltrating them and then dumping them online is leading to some really, really large ransomware payouts. And so I think that has been really interesting to watch over the last 6 months to a year.
Yeah, without mentioning the client, some of that can also be attributed to when's the last time you all rotated your AWS credentials? Is there a static key coded in any of your GitHub repos?
Yes, the
hackers
answer is
are
yes.
scouring the internet right now, just looking for stuff that they can use. And in some cases, it results in, access to the AWS configuration. Then they can change security group permissions. They can spin up an individual server. They can dump out data from another database and then move it out over a port that they set up just straight to the outside. So that sort of, again, it sounds pretty basic, but I think security teams are just so overwhelmed with how much else they have going on. It's hard to say, go back to basics and start over again.
So much data.
Yeah, in case of Asia, voice phishing as well as ransomware is also a problem, big problem. In our case, in nowadays, many people use the SMS messengers and other type of internet messengers, such as ordering and eating food and so on. So nowadays, most of criminals use a voice phishing to steal the money and so on. In our case, 10 times increased compared with the 8 years before.
Wow.
We have another question. It says, have you seen many incident response cases where forensics on IoT or embedded devices must be done to identify the attacker's entry point? I think, Asuka, that's probably a question you might be able to.
So I mainly research about like how to discover the vulnerability. So for the incident response case, I think Mika have more experience than me. Yeah. So could I pass the question to her?
No. Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Well, hopefully, if you have the right data and you're able to trace root cause, because again, in ransomware, a lot of the files on the file system are gone, but all of the artifacts that are core to the operation of the file system are still there. So say you find an indicator that points to an IP address that brings you to an IoT embedded device. I haven't seen much of that, except for maybe in the financial services industries, some ATMs and some payment networks still have to run on legacy operating systems. So it's a bit tangential, but those exploits do happen where it's not the asset you would think was compromised, but that lateral movement allows them to sort of bypass the security you thought you had in place on one device. I guess it's a half-baked answer, but
no, it's not. I think that's a fair answer. I think too, it's like, at least in my experience, again, from like an IR standpoint, like seeing IoT devices being used as like jump boxes, like just as the question was, like looking at the forensics on IoT or embedded devices to identify the attacker's entry point. And in a lot of cases that I've seen, the IoT device is the entry point. Like it's like that's like isn't so. It's interesting, to think about it that way. It's like, oh, look, it's this, IoT security camera or whatever, which is ironic that the security camera is the thing that allows an attacker into the environment. And then normally is a staging point for something like a ransomware attack or something like that. So
I think the quick takeaway is don't share credentials, individual credentials per device. Segmentation. Asuka would tell you all about patching firmware, right?
Right.
if you can, yeah, on some of them, it's not even an option. And that's what's frustrating as well.
Yeah, vendor doesn't like distribute a patch. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Is that getting better, Asuka? Like, is that like what's the shift there? Like, as in IoT devices, are vendors getting better at that?
It's getting a little bit better, but there's still a lots of problems. Like, for example, like the research that I conducted last year, I found like the vendor sometimes doesn't like release the patch for the so IoT devices have a lot of like series, like series A, series B, series C, and series B. And so that kind of a series usually shares the same firmware. However, vendors like release the patch for in different timing for different series. So that's gonna be like the one-day exploitation risk, and one-day exploitation. The attacker can one-day exploit the different series using the patch release from the another like series A to series B.
In the first day keynote, the speaker said that Singapore government has a plan for security rating on IoT devices. I heard so.
Yeah, I hope so. So that's actually, it's cool. I think that's it was a good keynote. I enjoyed it. Let's see. We're getting more questions. Yes. Let's see. With the increase in complexity in cyber threats and end user knowledge gaps in cybersecurity, what are the challenges faced to train the user? Ooh, that's a good one. Who wants to take that? What are the challenges in training the user? All right, I'm just going to keep talking. I feel like I'm rambling a lot here. But I think this is kind of getting a little bit better, at least better from where we were years ago. The understanding of the general user that security is important, I guess, is what is the first step, right? And I think we were fighting that fight 10 years ago, where we're trying to get people to do, we're like, security matters, security matters, security matters. And you just get that blank stare, where they're like, maybe it matters to you. But I think more and more end users are understanding that they, could potentially be a weak link in that, in the chain of security within an organization, and could cause a multi-million-dollar issue or their company to end up on the news, right? And so it is a little bit scary. It creates a little bit of anxiety, but it also means that it creates a sense of urgency to understand what the problem is. doing things like, and again, I feel like we keep going back. Foundations are important, right? We keep going back to foundational stuff, but even things like, doing a phishing campaign against your own users and having them understand that, like, oh, this is what a phishing email is. Because again, despite the incredible research that we see all the time, like most of the initial attack vectors for a lot of these, huge breaches are done through a simple phishing campaign or through cracking an RDP session or whatever. And so it's, I think that has improved. Users have started to understand, like, okay, we're part of this security thing, and it actually matters. So I don't know. We've seen some improvement. We're not there yet, but we've seen some improvement.
Go ahead.
Okay. After you.
I was just going to say, where there is a rule or a regulation or a requirement to train users or implement some sort of annual check, or even where the, I guess, punishment for violations is severe. I've heard of several banks and financial services companies in Hong Kong that have a 1 strike or 2 strike policy. If you click on one phishing email, you have to take 3 hours of training. But if you click on one again, you actually can be dismissed from the company.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's severe. That's crazy.
But it is not easy to educate the general people. But most of people still do not update their formulas.
Agreed. Well, I mean, we're getting close to running out of time here. I don't know. Does anybody have any final thoughts for the attendees before we say goodbye? You're killing me. Somebody say something.
It was lovely to chat with everyone.
It was good. Yeah, it was good to chat with you guys. I guess for the attendees, like I said, you've heard us talk about a bunch of different topics over the last hour, but a lot of the stuff that we talked about came back to foundational security, and a lot of the challenges that we're facing are still foundational issues that we've been battling for 20, 30 plus years. And so, we've gotten better at some things, but sometimes it feels like we take 2 steps forward, or 1 step forward and 2 steps back. But yeah, keep fighting the good fight out there, and we'll keep fighting it alongside you.
I hope all of you in real places in next year.
That's right. Hopefully we'll all be side by side next year.
Yeah, I want to meet all next year. Yeah.
All right. I think
in next year, Black Hat Asia 2021. When will it be held?
When will it be held? I don't know that date. Is there?
March or April?
Who knows? Whenever it is, I'll be there. I don't care. All I know is I could be at the Marina Bay Sands hanging out at that pool right now, and I'm not. So I have here, right here. So whenever it is, I will make sure that I'll see you guys there. So.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.